All right. So, welcome everybody to the Colorado Hydrogen Network July meeting 2025. And you can see the agenda here. We've got some interesting things to talk about today, some things on tutorials. And Buford Barr is here. He's going to give us an update on the hydrogen fuel station and some other activities that New Day Hydrogen has been doing. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And it looks like we are recording. Good. So, first of all, some coming events. I've been putting these up for a few months. Our friends down in Texas have a conference for their organization called Flying High, which has to do with hydrogen and aviation. And you can find out a little bit more information by going to that link there, highsky.org. This is just what is it, about a 4 hour? No, I thought it was a 1 hour virtual meeting, but you can check that out, and it's just a few dollars, so you might be interested in that. And then the other expo here is actually in Germany, so a bit of a trip for most of us. But if you are interested in that, definitely check that out. All right, so I think I saw Buford on. Buford, if you're ready, I'll stop sharing. I don't know if you've got slides or anything, but New Day's been pretty active the last month or so with some conferences and things, as well as there's probably just a little bit of an update for the fuel station program. So, Buford, why don't you go ahead and take the floor?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. If you want to leave that slide up, that'd be great. I don't have any slides, so something to people to look at, so they don't have to look at my pretty face. Um, yeah, I mean, like everybody working in the hydrogen space, I'm, we've the last, let's say, 6 months have been an interesting time frame. The uncertainty coming out of Washington due to the executive orders from President Trump have obviously, well, sown some uncertainty. I guess we'll put it at that. We basically have been on hold with our project. That's the establishment of those three hydrogen fueling stations along the I-25 corridor. Um, we placed our design efforts on hold simply because the executive orders specifically mentioned the Federal Highway Administration's Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program, which is the grant under which we were performing our work, but didn't specifically call out hydrogen. It did specifically talk about um, charging infrastructure. So, with the unknown, with the uncertainty, we decided the better part of valor was to pause our efforts and seek additional clarification. Well, it's taken us 6 months, and we're just starting to get some additional clarification. Um, Information's
Well,
coming in
I'm
bits and
sorry, but you
pieces.
knew that was going to come at some point in time.
I have to pierce this one now.
Um,
It's my look. It's my look. I can't get rid of it.
yeah, can you?
Um, I just muted everybody. Stand by, Buford. I've got to unmute you. Sorry. Where are you?
I can unmute
Oh, there
me.
you go. You got it. Okay.
So,
Sorry.
um, no, appreciate that. So basically, we're getting some indications that the grant program is still out there, still has funding, and still has the potential of money going our way. We are seeking written confirmation of this. Keep in mind, we were not the prime on the grant. That was Colorado State University system. So CSU has been in direct conversations with Federal Highway and is seeking that confirmation from them. So we're hopeful, fingers crossed, toes crossed, that that'll continue to go in the right direction, and then hopefully sometime here in the near future we can kind of start moving forward. Start reevaluating how we're going to kick off our design efforts and move forward. So yes, a lot has happened. Yes, we have a lot of uncertainty. Yes, we have some indications that are indicating a positive direction, but we still need some further confirmation before we can start anything back up. So it's a proverbial hurry up and wait. So we are hurrying up and we are waiting.
Hey, Buford, let
Um,
me add one little thing for the listeners or the folks on the call, and that is that the way this grant works is you have to spend your own money first, and then you submit that to the Federal Highway Administration, and they pay you back. So that's why you're being so cautious. You don't want to be stuck and be in a situation where you don't get paid back.
Correct. It's not a case where we got a check for $9 million and now we're spending off of that. It's all based off of reimbursement. So, yeah, we don't want to get, to use a great Colorado analogy, we don't want to get too far over our skis in regards to that. So, you're exactly right. Talking about the other items that were up there, I'll go ahead and skip to the Colorado Capital Conference. New Day Hydrogen was invited by the sponsors of the event. That's Senator Bennett, Senator Hickenlooper, as well as Colorado Mesa College, University of Colorado, and then Colorado State University. It was an event held in DC, basically bringing in business leaders, community leaders from Colorado to meet with the Colorado delegation. And it was a great opportunity. Seth Terry, our CEO, participated and was able to basically meet face to face with Senator Hickenlooper, with Representative Neguse, Representative Evans. With Representative Hurd and Representative DeGette, he was able to meet with their staff. So quite a few of the Colorado delegation, he was able to either meet directly with them or with their staffs, walk through what we're doing, what New Day Hydrogen is doing, what's happening in Colorado when it comes to hydrogen. They were all extremely interested and all basically have expressed to help us out and find out where things are going. Senator Hickenlooper has been extremely responsive in regards to that, has reached out and has inquired directly with Federal Highway, as has Representative DeGette as well. Just inquiring as far as where this is, where it's going, and why we can't speed up that process. So definitely appreciate it. It's Government relations is a not an easy undertaking, but it's definitely one that we hope will pay off for the benefit of New Day Hydrogen in general or in specific, and then hydrogen in Colorado in specific. So we're hopeful that that'll move things forward and assist us in that process. The Hydrogen Technology Expo, Brian made reference to the one happening in Germany. The one I attended was not in as exotic a location. It was in Houston. But it was definitely well worth the effort. A lot of um, uh, the manufacturers of the equipment, not a whole lot of the electrolyzers, but almost all of the compression manufacturers were there. Got to speak to all of those. The dispensing manufacturers were there. Got to speak to them, and then a whole lot of folks that did, let's say, parts of the balance of plant, valving, tubing. The sensors, all of that. So it was a great experience. Spent a day, and unfortunately, I only had a day to give because they were tearing down the expo as I was making my final runs through. But was definitely well worth the effort. Got a lot of great contacts, and are continuing those conversations this week and beyond. So definitely was well worth that effort. Like I said, not as exotic a location as Germany, but a little bit cheaper plane ticket to get there.
So, Buford, when you were there at that expo, did you see the CHN logo anywhere?
I did not. I
Okay.
wasn't looking for it necessarily, but I did not see it.
Well, because I've been promoting that, they offered to put our logo somewhere. I don't know if it was in one of the magazines that they hand out or whatever, but I did get contacted by some folks through that. So I was just curious whether you had happened to notice the CHN logo anywhere.
Well, I happen to have the show magazine, so I'll take a look through it, and if I find the logo, I'll let you know.
Yeah, just curious.
Of course.
Somebody saw it somewhere there, so I didn't find out where that was, but But anyway, so good.
All
Well,
right.
I think it's really fantastic. First of all, that you and Seth have been able to keep going pretty much on your own nickel for the last, what is it now, 5 years, and keep this alive and keep going forward and not get discouraged. Well, or at least not give up. I think we all feel a certain amount of discouragement that this is taking as long as it is. But to spend the money to go to Houston and those kind of things. Fantastic. Thanks for doing that. We got to keep going. You hear of people like Billy Joel, who worked for 10 years before his music caught on. And hopefully it won't take us all 10 years for hydrogen to catch on. But a little bit of a pep talk here. We just got to keep at it. We can't give up.
I mean, the reality is that there's a lot of positive indicators that are out there. There's a lot of headwind, obviously, that we're resisting. That's a challenge that's been in front of us and everybody else on this call as well. But there are some positive indicators that are continuing to kind of peek through some of the black clouds. So I agree. Keep up the good fight, continue to move forward, and I think together we can move this, get this market established.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the three hydrogen station program, you mentioned you're really trying to get something in writing. Do you have any indication if that's forthcoming or when?
We've had CSU had a conversation with the CFI program manager, and they implied that things were going in the right direction. They also indicated that there's a long list of people that are lined up trying to get basically what CSU is asking for is a modification of their grant agreement, just changing the dates, changing, some of those things. And Federal Highway basically said there's a long list of folks that are lined up to do just that. So, um, even with that, somewhat positive news, the timing is uncertain.
Yeah. Well, I worked for a defense contractor, Honeywell, for 36 years, and I know even under the best of circumstances, things move quite slowly in the government, just trying to
Yes,
get things signed or get things put out. So I guess I wouldn't fret too much, although it's frustrating because you really can't really go forward till you have that.
exactly right. Exactly right. So I did look in the show guide. Let me see if I can.
Mm,
There you are.
all right, cool. Great.
So you made it in the guide as one of their thank you to all our supporters.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, I knew it had to be in there, either in that or somewhere. So I probably should have gone down to that show, but it would have been out of my own pocket. And by the time you pay airline and hotel, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
really adds up quick. But all right. Well, does anybody else have any questions for Buford or kudos or comments or anything?
I could use kudos.
Well, like I say, I appreciate so much that you and Seth keep this going.
Yeah, yeah, this is Jane. Buford, Seth, way to go. Keep up the hard work and the great work that you're doing. We all really appreciate it and really appreciate you. And
Thanks, Jane.
yeah, and Brian, Chris and I at Electric Green have been doing this now for 10 years, just as an
Yeah.
FYI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Well,
rest of us look like newcomers.
and I want to help all of us as much as I possibly can without having a checkbook.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. Thank
Well,
you.
thanks. Thanks. So,
And Buford, Jim Courtboy here, same. Keep it
Hey,
going.
Jim.
Okay.
all right. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thanks, Buford. Appreciate
Of
your
course.
time to give us an update.
Yep.
All right. So, turning our attention to Colorado Hydrogen Day. The purpose of Hydrogen Day was, at least last year when we were thinking about it, was to try to highlight all of the hydrogen progress in Colorado. And we had a lot to brag about last year with the Nikola trucks we had running and the things that Jane and Chris Allo are doing with the electric green and so forth. Really, it was a lot of progress, and I was proud to put it out there and boast about it. Um, this year, really, not too much new has happened. Even a little bit of a step back. Of course, you all heard Nikola Motors had declared bankruptcy, and so the trucks that we had running here are, I'm sure, not going to keep running. And also, I put a call out to the folks who exhibited last year, and it didn't really get much interest. Got a few yeses, a few maybes, and so forth. So my concern was that holding this event again this year as a kind of a mediocre event would probably be worse than no event at all. If we tried to get the press there, some of the legislators there, or even the public, not a lot has happened. So it also takes, of course, as you can imagine, a great deal of my time, pretty much all my time, to try to prepare this thing. So this year, I'm thinking that don't really want to have a mediocre event, and my time could probably be better spent on this new organization that we've started, the Rocky Mountain Hydrogen Foundation. That's the website there. So my thought is that that would probably have a greater impact working on the foundation than holding a hydrogen day. So decided to suspend the Hydrogen Day this year. So I'm sure you're all disappointed. It was really a hard call. Could kind of go either way, but again, I don't want us to look weak, in the eyes of the public and the media. So I think we're probably better off just to suspend it for this year. So I don't know if anybody on the call has any comments or anything you want to say about that. Not too much. I got a few email responses back, and people said, "Yeah, I can understand that's probably the right call." But hopefully, we'll have some things really to brag about next year, and we can hold a real substantial event next year. All right. If you do have any comments you want to send me by email or something, please go ahead. All right. So switching gears a little bit, a couple of new things have popped up a little bit on my radar. They weren't things that I didn't know about, but kind of giving them a new focus. One of the things that I try to do with both the CHN and these meetings and the newsletter that we do, as well as the podcast, is to try to help us all put things into context and maybe put some things together that give us new ideas on how doing things. And there's really three parts to that. The thing is that how hydrogen gets deployed has a lot to do with timing, has a lot to do with cost and scale. And also we have to consider the big picture, which is really what I'm going to talk to a little bit more today. But, we have to think about the fact that there's really some short-term and long-term solutions. For example, for a short-term solution for, say, a user, maybe trucking hydrogen or using electrolysis makes sense. But in the long term, maybe it's pipelines or something else. The other thing is that maybe in the short term, hydrogen is going to be more expensive than it will in the long term. And so that's something we have to keep in mind. Kind of already talked to this here, but one of the big things we need to think about is that hydrogen has got to compete. So the cost part of this with gasoline, diesel, and natural gas. And so how do we do that? What sources of hydrogen do we really need to think about? And then on the scale side of things, for example, if you're thinking about, well, should it be trucked gaseous hydrogen or should it be trucked liquid? You not only have to think about the cost of those things, but also if you've got a situation where you need more than a truckload of hydrogen per day, so this is the scale part of this, maybe you need to think about liquid instead. So all of these things are what I try to help with by showing different cost and cost price analysis. And then where I'm kind of going with this today is that we need to think about the entire big picture. My background is systems engineering, and systems engineers talk about the boundary of what's inside that boundary and what's outside. And if we're thinking about simply what's the cheapest and best solution for hydrogen, maybe that overlooks solving another environmental problem with that hydrogen. And so that's kind of a lead into what I'm going to talk about here. And really, the upshot of all of this, which I've said many times, is that this whole renewable energy and the energy transition really changes pretty fast. And so we've all really got to be prepared to update our opinions. What seemed like a good idea last month maybe isn't a good idea this month. So if we start out looking at, well, what are the prime clean hydrogen sources? Obviously, electrolysis, that's the one that's on everybody's mind. As a matter of fact, people kind of equate electrolysis with green. But also, what's starting to really become prevalent is the natural hydrogen that occurs naturally underground through wells. And there's only a few pilot wells at this point in time in Kansas and one in Nebraska. But we're sitting on a lot of natural hydrogen here, as the USGS thinks. So that could be a very, very significant source of hydrogen. And if you look at the rough order magnitude cost there in that right column, at the well, that could be 30 cents. The ARPA has got some estimates, maybe 40, 50, 60, 80 cents, but certainly down a lot cheaper than doing electrolysis. Now, you'll have to move the hydrogen, so that adds to it. But the other, which I've talked about so many times before, is using old petroleum reservoirs and either injecting microbes, which release hydrogen, or injecting oxygen, which releases hydrogen. And although those are not renewable because petroleum obviously is a limited resource, they are zero greenhouse gas because the carbon never leaves the ground. So you don't have methane leaks. You don't have carbon that you have to sequester. So those, if you're thinking just how do I get to some good cost, good price, good clean hydrogen, those are ideas. But what about this idea of pyrolysis of tires and plastic? Um, this came up recently, and so it's something I've started looking at and thinking about, could that possibly make sense? Now, under renewability and zero greenhouse gas, I've written special case there, and it's true, it's probably not as clean as other sources of hydrogen, and I'll talk to that in a minute. But it does solve another problem, which is this huge amount of waste of tires and plastic, and I'll talk to that a bit. So again, if we were thinking only pure energy sources, clean energy sources, we might miss the opportunity to solve other environmental problems. All right, so why would we want to do this? Well, like I said, tires and plastic are a huge environmental problem. Tires, very high production rate. Tires aren't going away anytime soon. I haven't heard of any cars that use levitation. Very, very little of it is recycled, and it's very hard to degrade them. Some are chopped up and added to pavement and used for other things like maybe running tracks, things like that. But that's not a very big proportion. There's about one tire per person per year discarded in the United States. So obviously millions of tires. And a lot of times they're burned, which of course is a very polluting situation. Even if you um, capture some of the particulates and some of the heavy carbon, you're still emitting carbon dioxide. And so the major thing that's done with these is they're dumped in landfills. And unfortunately, in landfills, they, believe it or not, can spontaneously combust. And I understand tire fires are really hard to put out. They can collect water and be a breeding ground for mosquitoes and other insects. And believe it or not, they can float to the surface. Now, I was aware of like buried propane tanks if they're left empty and they're not anchored down. I mean, they're lighter than the dirt around and they could eventually work their way to the surface. But apparently, the same problem happens with tires. And then, of course, they can leach harmful chemicals just through weathering and things like that. So plastics, there's about 40 million tons produced per year in the US with only about 5 to 6% recycled. And I think we've probably all heard about the microplastics that are being found everywhere. I've even heard of fetuses having microplastics in them. And this is really considered a pretty big problem. So here, this was a graph that actually came out in 2020, so a little bit out of date. But as of 2020, well, or as of, yeah, 2020, about half of all the plastics produced have been made since the year 2000. So you can see the direction of this curve. And so obviously this is something that we've got to deal with and find a solution for. All right, so why the pyrolysis? Well, the primary goal would be really to dispose of this waste in the most environmentally beneficial way. Obviously, we want to keep greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. But the secondary goal would be, well, let's try to make this maybe pay its own way by either creating materials that are stable for disposal that somebody would pay to dispose, like a government probably, or useful for industry. Tires have carbon black, which, if could be recovered, that could be used by the tire industry for making new tires. Generating energy, obviously. And here's the thing is society is going to continue to need tires and plastics. We're trying to get away from plastics a bit, but we'll never get away from it entirely. They'll probably be produced indefinitely. So if we propose to make hydrogen from them, this is not going to drive fossil fuel consumption, but really it would solve a waste issue. And there may be subsidies for this. So possibly the government or users that dispose of this could pay something that could help reduce the cost of the hydrogen that's made from the pyrolysis. All right, so what is pyrolysis? Well, some of you probably are a little bit familiar with that, and this is a very, very general kind of a diagram. But as you can imagine, the first thing that has to happen is with the plastic or the tires, you've got to shred them up. And then generally they go into what's called an anaerobic gasifier. So anaerobic means no oxygen present. They're heated up. And of course, the volatiles start boiling off and form gases, which you can see here in the diagram are taken off in the upper right of that tank. And then you do try to recover as much solid carbon as you can. And then, of course, a lot of tires, most tires nowadays have some steel in them. So you recover that and either dispose of it or use it somehow. Now, with the gases, those can be distilled and refined to produce a diesel. And obviously, that's going to put CO2 in the atmosphere when it's used. But some of those gases can be put through what's called a water gas shift reaction. And this is part of the reaction that's used for steam methane reforming, where you start out with carbon monoxide, CO, and add some water to that. And then you're able to recover hydrogen and carbon dioxide. And as you can see, hopefully you can see my cursor here, there's also some hydrogen sulfide because there's sulfur in tires. That's what provides the vulcanization, which gives tires their characteristic qualities. And of course, hydrogen and CO2. And so then those are run through various processes to try to separate those gases out. So you're going to end up with some carbon dioxide and hopefully do some carbon capture and come up with the carbon. From my research, carbon capture from point source is probably at best maybe 90% efficient. So you're still going to have some release of CO2, certainly a lot less than if you just burn these tires. Hydrogen sulfide can hopefully be captured. And then, of course, the hydrogen. All right, so this is basically the same process for plastic. It just some of the details vary on that. So I don't know if anybody on the call is a little bit more familiar with this than I am and wants to make any comments, or especially if I've got anything really messed up here. I'm not a chemist. No comments. Okay, well, I think you get the general idea of how this works. All right, so why do this? Well, as I said earlier, we're really trying to turn a waste problem into an energy solution. And with tires, obviously, we can derive hydrogen and some diesel and solid carbon and some steel out of that. We are going to end up with some CO2 that's either got to be captured and sequestered, or probably some will be released. With plastics, the pyrolysis could produce some hydrogen and diesel and solid carbon. And again, there's, whoops, sorry, went too fast. Probably some CO2 that's got to be captured. So again, this isn't a perfectly clean solution, but I think at the end of the day, society's got to decide, is the problem this solves, getting rid of some of this waste and the energy it's created in the process, is that worthwhile for the CO2 emissions? Because we can't do nothing. Tires we're going to all be awash in tires eventually. I mean, it really is a big problem, and probably the same thing with plastic. And so this is one solution. Are there better ones? I don't know, possibly, but I think this is something that we shouldn't all just turn our backs on just because it's not perfectly clean. I think it's something we ought to at least keep on our radar, keep thinking about it. And, earlier I mentioned that we may have interim solutions or early solutions maybe this is an easy way to get from tires and plastic to hydrogen until we can really get those hydrogen wells and things online. So again, as a systems engineer, I say you've got to you got to have your boundaries and think about whether you're being too narrow in your focus, and maybe there are some solutions here that are good interim steps.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, Jack Steinhauser. It just occurs to me that y'all might be interested in knowing. I'm working with a company right now that has a project to do exactly this with tires, and it's centered around a facility that's northeast of Denver, which is literally called Tire Mountain.
Mhm.
And it's a fairly large property that's gridded out so that there's not enough concentration of tires in any one spot to cause the spontaneous combustion. But they have an estimated 2 million metric tons of tires at that facility, and they are planning to do a pyrolysis facility, and they are planning to produce hydrogen, diesel, solid carbon, and steel there. So, to the extent that people are interested in knowing an actual project that's going on, it is going on. And I'm actually working with a company that provides pyrolytic gasification technology called Hoskinson. And so we're in discussions with this company about possibly using their technology to do that. So, to the extent that people are interested, I thought I'd put it out there.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Actually, I'm been in contact with them and talking to them and so forth, which is what put this on the radar. I didn't specifically mention them just in case they're a little bit worried about competition and some of those kind of things. But yeah, that Tire Mountain is the biggest repository of tires in the country, as it turns out. And yeah, I guess that's a dubious distinction that we've got here in Colorado, that we've got one of the biggest landfills. But yeah, high hopes for that. Hopefully, some of that hydrogen maybe will start making its way into our systems here in the Front Range and beyond. So
And Brian, just a quick comment. You had mentioned about interim steps for making hydrogen. Um, I threw in the chat, you might want to look at plastic to green. That is basically doing the same thing with the plastics and not the
right,
tires. From the hydrogen perspective, obviously that's one of the products that is produced from the
right.
breakdown, but plastic is 85% carbon, only 15% hydrogen. So it is a far greater source of the carbon black than it is of the hydrogen. But yes, you are still making hydrogen as part of that plastic breakdown
Yeah.
process.
And yeah, thanks for mentioning plastic to green, and that's Ed Van Dyne. I don't think Ed's on, but I've exchanged several emails with Ed this week and talking to him all the time. But it's my understanding, well, not my understanding, that it's a fact that what plastic to green is interested in doing is making ammonia, which actually takes me to part two of our our tutorial today. So, yeah, these things are coming up on the radar because of some things that are going on. And really, I had kind of turned my back on some of these previously and starting to rethink that. And so, trying to maybe give everybody on the call here the advantage of my learning process and kind of where I've gone with it. And free to disagree, of course, but yeah. So thanks, David. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and just as a perspective, the reason that plastic to green is focused on making the ammonia as opposed to just keeping the hydrogen as pure hydrogen is twofold. One is because there's an immediate market for ammonia, and ammonia, as you are probably well aware, there are a lot of challenges with storing and transporting hydrogen. Ammonia is a much easier medium for storage and transport.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're creating pure hydrogen and using pure hydrogen, then you've got that, you got to create the ammonia and then you got to break it down again on the backside. So it might not be worth it. But that there was sort of the reasoning behind why ammonia was the use of the hydrogen coming out of the plastic breakdown.
Right. And I absolutely think that's the right thing to do. And again, this is to my point of where's the low hanging fruit? Where's the early opportunities? If it's in ammonia, start there. And then from there, maybe we can work to making hydrogen from it if it makes sense. So, all right. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things you just mentioned, David, here in just a little bit. It's part two of the tutorial. So All right, so I updated this ecosystem drawing that I showed at least once before, maybe a couple times before. And there's more to this ecosystem. There is biofuels and so forth, but I'm really trying to focus a little bit, trying to narrow my scope a little bit to really focus on hydrogen. And so you do see some ammonia here. And the reason for that is when you generate hydrogen underground with oxygen injection into old oil reservoirs, you've got to come up with an air separator anyway because you want to inject oxygen. So you get nitrogen for free. Might as well put a device on there to take the nitrogen that you're creating and some of the hydrogen and make that into ammonia, if that makes sense. So that's why that makes it onto this graph. Otherwise, this would be just purely a hydrogen focus. All right, so as promised, here is topic 2, using ammonia as an energy carrier. And there was a press release this week that kind of prompted me on this, and it does kind of fit in with the discussion we just had about pyrolysis. But um, David, as you just pointed out, ammonia is really an attractive energy carrier because it's pretty stable at ambient temperatures. You only need to pressurize it to about 10 bar, 150 psi, which is pretty easy to do. There's a worldwide distribution network of all kinds of tankers, from trucks to rail to ships. There's also pipelines all over the country, pretty much, with ammonia because it's such a popular fertilizer. So, liquid ammonia versus liquid hydrogen, there's actually 1.7 times more hydrogen per volume in the ammonia than there is in liquid hydrogen. Also, the transportation costs, it's about a third because all you need is a 150 psi tank and it can sit there forever. You don't have to refrigerate it or anything else with the ammonia. So that's a lot easier. Whereas liquid hydrogen is going to either want to boil off or you have to keep it refrigerated or pressurized or both. And I just kind of got ahead of myself a little bit there. And the other thing about ammonia is it can be burned. It can be burned either directly in boilers, turbines, engines, or it can be blended with hydrogen, which, as it turns out, can match the combustion characteristics of things like diesel and jet fuel or natural gas and more. So it's pretty versatile. I mean, I would have to say probably the only drawback to ammonia is that it is a tissue irritant. And although that's handled well worldwide, I think it does sometimes give people pause. I don't know. We're seeing ammonia is proposed as a fuel for cargo ships, but for passenger ships and so forth, don't know if that's ever going to happen. But to me, this is kind of a small drawback. But so if we just look at what are our energy options, and this is a bit of a review, but obviously we've got electrons and we've got molecules. So we could create electricity and stay with electricity, using wind and solar. We can create hydrogen from electricity through electrolysis, which we're all familiar with. Or we can go directly from electricity to ammonia, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And we could go from electricity to ammonia because it's easier to ship and store, and then eventually crack that, as it's called, crack that ammonia to either all hydrogen or part of it. Molecule-wise, we've got a lot of opportunities coming up in the future for geologic hydrogen, either natural hydrogen wells or pulling hydrogen out of oil reservoirs, and then compress it and ship it as a gas or liquefy it and then ship it via refrigerated or compression storage. And then, of course, biofuels, which I'm really not going to talk to too much. I've talked to on some of our meetings before. But some of the current issues, creating ammonia from electricity has been inefficient in the past. You really had to take your electricity, run it through an electrolyzer to make hydrogen, and then split air and come up with the nitrogen to make ammonia. And currently in the world, 95% of ammonia is created via the Haber-Bosch or Haber-Bosch process, which takes a natural gas input. It's got high CO2 emissions. It's a high pressure process, 300 bar, and it requires a refinery sized infrastructure. It's a city block. It's pretty big. which of course is high capital cost. So, but there's been a new development in ammonia production. At least it was new to me, and it's the press release was fairly recent. But what this is called is plasma ammonia synthesis, which takes air, water, and electricity and goes directly to ammonia. And I'll explain all this here in a second. So here, this is a company called Plasma Leap. They're down in Australia. And very simple diagram. You see an air and water coming in on the left. Plasma, and of course, a plasma is a gas that either has extra or less electrons, so becomes electrically conductive. And then that creates various forms of nitrous oxides in a solution. There's some water involved there. Then they go through an electrochemical conversion, which can think of that as like an electrolyzer kind of a thing, to get directly to ammonia. And you compare that to the Haber-Bosch process, which, as you can see here, you have to start out with natural gas and then go through steam methane reforming to get hydrogen. And then you've got to do an air separator, usually cryogenic, to come up with the nitrogen. And then that goes into the Haber-Bosch process, which uses various catalysts to create the ammonia, which has been a savior for the world as far as fertilizers to improve crop productivity. But it's an expensive process, or at least the capital costs are pretty high. All right, so this other process uses, as I said, an arc, a plasma arc, and then that's run through basically a membrane type of electrolyzer to get to the gaseous ammonia. So if you'd all like to learn a little bit more about that, the URL was a little bit long. I did my usual and created a shortcut on tinyURL. But if you go to tinyurl.com/plasma ammonia, you can get the paper that was put out by this PJ Cullen, who's the professor who came up with this down in Australia. All right, so takeaway on ammonia is as a hydrogen carrier, it has some merit, and I think it probably has to be looked at a cost price analysis or a trade study, case by case, to look at whether gaseous hydrogen is the right solution as a carrier, or liquid hydrogen, or ammonia, that's NH3. The final use for that ammonia could be as a fertilizer, like we talked about. It could be as a fuel for engines, and it could be just burned in things like boilers, or some of that ammonia could be cracked back to hydrogen to tweak the blend so you get the right combustion characteristics. Hydrogen burns really fast, and ammonia burns really slow. So by putting them together, you can kind of tailor the blends. So kind of going on this whole theme with ammonia, this week, actually on Thursday, I'll be recording a podcast with a company called Amogy, AMOGY. And that I hope to get out by Friday, if not Friday, Saturday. So you can take a listen to that. They characterize their company as taking ammonia to power. So they're not looking so much at creating it as actually using the ammonia. But I think that'll be interesting for our listeners. All right, I think, yeah, that's all I had on this. So let me stop, pause, whatever, for comments or questions. I'm not a chemist, so I probably can't tell you much than I already have. But anybody have anything they want to add or ask? Hope I didn't put you all to sleep.
Brian, Bill here.
Yeah. Hey, Bill, how are you?
Fine. Our company was a partner on an application for Fed funding for electricity to ammonia via the plasma process, folks from University of Minnesota. So I'm familiar with that. That was done via the ARPA-E program called, I don't remember, liquid fuels or something like that. By Soloveichik was the principal guy for ARPA-E on that. So you may be able to find that application and have a look at it. So people have been thinking about plasma for a long time. The folks interested in ammonia should probably have a look at the website for Ammonia Energy.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked at them for a while. I think they're just search for Ammonia Energy based in New York. They have a very large database of the presentations at their annual conference back 15 or 20 years, I think.
Hmm.
I used to give conferences there often. Another presentations. Another aspect to ammonia is energy storage media. The large liquid ammonia tanks common in the Corn Belt typically store 200,000 megawatt hours in a tank with a capex of about 15 million. So that's 10 cents a kilowatt hour capex compared to $200 or $300 per kilowatt hour for batteries. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Bill, over the years that I've been in this space, I've seen a lot of lab things come out, like hydride storage or other things, and then you never hear much about them. And part of it is that what works in the lab at small scale doesn't always work large scale, or the cost or the cost benefit isn't there or whatever. Do you have an opinion either way on this plasma creation of ammonia? Do you have a feel for how real it is? Has it been around a long time, but it's never going anywhere? Do you have any thoughts?
I don't know what the scaling potential is, and I think that's maybe where it ran aground with ARPA-E. It simply doesn't scale.
Well, but that might be a good thing because Haber-Bosch is big scale, and if you've got a situation where you want something in a couple of cargo containers, maybe that's a good thing.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
So,
Well,
so Brian, just a little perspective. So you're right about Haber-Bosch being very large scale.
mhm,
There are some, I think, companies that have some process options that are significantly smaller.
right.
The scale up issue kind of goes from both directions. One is trying to scale Haber-Bosch down to something that is more portable and you can do on a smaller scale. When we're talking about the lab scale, very often you've got good lab results, but scaling up even to something that's going to produce, you a few, cubic meters a day is already a challenge. So there's a wide variety on those scaling issues. And just to be clear, for the Haber-Bosch process, you had mentioned on your slide that it takes methane as the input. That just happens to be where it starts for most of
Mhm.
the ammonia production facilities. The Haber-Bosch process itself doesn't require you to use anything that's carbon-based going in. It is basically the process that takes the hydrogen and the nitrogen and forms the ammonia. The vast majority of those processes do take natural gas in, it's burned, you get the CO2, so you got the emissions, but that's not necessarily a part of the Haber-Bosch process.
Well, you're right, David, and thanks for pointing that out. And I should have mentioned that. That's like when people say, "Well, I don't like hydrogen because it comes from natural gas," and well, it doesn't have to. And I knew that was the case here as well, and I should have mentioned that. So thanks.
Well, I
But
didn't mean to call you out.
no, 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 not at all. I'm really glad you mentioned it because I should have. But I think that you're also correct that there are other small scale ways to create ammonia. Our friend Jennifer Beach, unfortunately, their company is out of business, but they were working on mm, I guess it was one cargo container scale system. So, uh, we're trying to bring up this whole ecosystem of hydrogen, the whole market. And so we have to start kind of small. And so that's why, when I was talking with Bill, I said that small scale might be a good thing, at least initially. Bill, did you have another comment?
The only other one was, sorry, I don't remember.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
I put ammoniaenergy.org in the chat.
Oh, yes, thanks. And I spoke one time to I guess it's their CEO or their director or something. I don't even remember his name. And
Trevor Brown.
yeah, Trevor Brown, that's him. And yeah, I think it's worthwhile for us hydrogen folks to keep tabs with the ammonia folks. Yeah,
Yes.
it's really a little bit perplexing. I'm not sure which way this is all going to go. But like I said, there's a lot of ammonia as a hydrogen carrier has merit for sure.
My other comment I remembered we need to wait for Deere to come up with ammonia fuel compatible with all their diesel engine operated equipment. Caterpillar has looked at it. We know that the diesel will run on pure ammonia, but maybe only on two-cycle, very large, low RPM marine engine. The MAN and Wärtsilä and other people who make such engines have figured out a way of making them run on 100% ammonia, or as you said, container ships and bulk carriers, but not for cruise ships.
Yeah, and there are container ships out there, or well, cargo ships, I guess would be a better way to put it, that I think are being built to use ammonia. Methanol seems to be a little more popular right now, but again, we're just going to have to see where this whole market goes. But in the meantime, we've got to keep an open mind.
Methanol is a hydrocarbon. There are only two carbon-free fuels that chemistry has given us, hydrogen and anhydrous ammonia.
Well, that's true, but methanol, of course, is stable at ambient temperature and pressure. And if you make it from biomass, now at least you've got a cycle of that carbon is taken out of the atmosphere, burned back to the atmosphere, which may still have some negative environmental consequences, even though the net greenhouse gas is essentially zero, or theoretically.
You get one more trip with the carbon atom before you release it as CO2.
What do you mean you get one more trip?
The carbon atom is going to be released as CO2 when you consume the green methanol.
Oh, yes. And presumably that carbon came out of the atmosphere, courtesy of the plants in the first place. Now, people can argue if there's a time delay, it hurts things. If there's a geographic difference, that could make a difference. So there's those issues. But methanol is a pretty convenient fuel because it is so stable at ambient temperatures and pressures. So,
right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Always appreciate your comments. So. All right.
Bill, it's Jim Corboy here. I just point out the Green Hydrogen Coalition Summit a couple of weeks ago, Janice Lynn's group. It was a 2-day discussion, and there was a lot of conversation about ammonia, companies that are active in that space, and companies. There's one company out of Stanford that just raised $5 million of venture capital with a new Haber-Bosch technology, looking for partners. So it's very much on the mind of the California group of people, both for agriculture as well as for export.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Well, I mean,
Thank you.
I will challenge anybody on the planet that they cannot guess at where some of these things are going to go. And my favorite example of that is the video recorder wars, and I've brought this up before, between Betamax and VHS. And I would have bet on Betamax, and it didn't win, but it was for reasons other than technical. And so some of these things, it's going to be the market that wins the day. Some of them, it could be just timing and other things. And so I really get on my soapbox whenever anybody says, well, I think it's going to go this way and I don't want to support this other, I mean, that's the argument we have between battery cars and hydrogen cars, right? So anyway, that's enough of that. I think I've driven that point home far enough. So, well, we're about to jump off of ammonia. So if anybody has any other comments or questions, please go ahead.
Hey, this is Bill out in California. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Good. Question about ammonia. When you burn it, do you get oxides and not nitrogen that you have to deal with?
Yeah, actually you do. And that's probably one of the negatives. There are exhaust treatments, the typical thing you can think about is like a catalytic converter on an automobile, but I don't think you can collect 100% of it. Any chemists on that want to comment on that, but yeah, that is an issue.
You form NOx at 1800 degrees. I've forgotten whether that's C or K. And Eddie Sturman at Sturman Industries in Colorado, in his early days with the ICE, with the all-electronic engine, where the valves were entirely under electronic hydraulic solenoid control software, was able to open an exhaust valve, I think it was, just in time to prevent that temperature in the combustion chamber from reaching 1800, and so he vastly reduced the NOx production, I think.
Right.
On a large ship, they already have NOx control, so it doesn't matter much to them. They just put in a slightly larger system.
Okay. All right. And by the way, burning pure hydrogen has the same issue because you're burning air. And so the air has got 70% nitrogen, and so that's an issue. And yeah, NOx is kind of a bad greenhouse gas. So um, yeah, these are
Well,
issues.
it sounds like it's kind of dealt with because it's been around for a while, so we know it's there, it's dealt with, you minimize it. Um, my other question is, I looked at diesel pickup trucks and they have an ammonia tank for some kind of air treatment, or what is that all about? Anybody know?
Um, let's see, the DEF, what's that stand for? The that's to help treat the exhaust, but I'm not sure. I think it is for NOx, and I'm not a chemist, so I'm out of my league a little bit here. But the
Oh, it's just sort of a trivia question more than anything. I was just curious.
That that is for NOx mitigation.
okay.
Okay, sounds good. And then anybody looking at Mirais and uh, fuel cell vehicles out there in Colorado and have a way to fuel them? That came up last time, and Jane Allo had uh, chimed in that there is a way. Um, but I wanted to follow up to see what's the status of that.
Well, that was Bill. I don't know if you were on earlier when Buford from New Day Hydrogen, and Buford's still on, was talking about this grant for 3 hydrogen fuel stations along I-25. Those are really going to be the first public stations that I know of, unless Jane, you think you'll beat them to the to the punch with anything you're doing. If you want to comment.
I think she left the meeting,
Hmm. Okay, so
but
Bill, this is something I've been working on for I don't know, 6 years plus.
sure.
It seems like every time we had some Colorado money, and then COVID took it away, and then we've got this grant from the federal government, and it's got one foot on the banana peel, as they say. So very frustrating. I don't know if any other state, Texas or maybe New Jersey or New York, might beat us to the first other fuel stations outside of California. Um, California seems to be kind of dropping the ball with $33 per kilogram hydrogen, and it's just all very frustrating because it's something we absolutely need, and not very many people seem to appreciate that.
Right. Well, we pay our $36 a kilogram out here, and I'm still on the Toyota's gift card or whatever the fuel card they give with the sale of the vehicle. Good to go so far, but that's going to run out, and I I think I'll just continue buying expensive fuel for this car and live with it, and so be it. But hopefully the price will come down.
Well, we hope so, and I'm
Yeah.
working on trying to do a podcast on that, maybe in the fall, to just talk about why why it is what it is. But discussion for another day. So
Sure.
all right. I don't really have too much else to talk about. I did already mention the podcast coming out with Emoji or Emoji. I need to find out before the podcast how to pronounce that. Recording that on Thursday. I did recently put out a podcast, maybe some of you have heard, called Move Over Electrolysis, Make Way for Geologic Hydrogen. And in that, I throw out a lot of cost numbers talking about why geologic hydrogen is really so important. Um, then lastly, I just want to kind of remind everybody that if you feel so moved and would like to help with either for individuals, $50 a year or $200 a year for startups, um, and that's tax deductible, please feel free to do that. And then we still have our membership that includes a membership in Colorado Clean Tech. Which is a little bit more money, and this is really intended for corporations and things, but there's a lot more benefits with that because it includes that Colorado Clean Tech membership. And then, as always, please, everyone, you are absolutely welcome to continue to participate and participate fully without paying a membership. But any money you do throw our way just helps us do things like maybe hopefully next year we'll have another Colorado Hydrogen Day. So I think, well, that's just showing the website. And then, oh, one last thing, and that is there's a special offer that CRAD up in Boulder has. They've got a big hydrogen transportation report. There's 15% discount if you use this discount code, and we get a little bit of funding out of that as well. So you can check that out, find out more about it at this shortened web address here of SEP Trans X Sum, which is the CRAD Enterprise Partners Transportation summary, executive summary is what the X Sum is. So, all right. Well, it's a short meeting today, just an hour, because we just didn't have a lot more material, but I am going to go ahead and adjourn. But as always, please feel free to contact me with emails or email's the best, but we can set up a call if you want to talk longer with any of your thoughts. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, Brian.
All right. Thanks again, Buford.
Of course.
Okay. Bye now.